Hello everyone. Now we'll start with a new video which is very important topic in JavaScript. The topic is event handling. Let's start with this topic. So what is event handling? Can see this what is event handling? Any program that uses GUI, which is a graphical user interface, which is written for Windows, is event driven. Event describes the change of the state of any object. Events are generated as a result of user interaction with the graphical user interface components. So changing the state of an object is known as event. So basically when you click on button or any other components, so when the state will be changed is called as event. For example, clicking on a button, entering a character in the text box, moving a mouse, selecting an item from the list, scrolling a page is the example for the events. And the package for this which is used is java.awt.event package. So package for this event is java.awt.event that provides many event classes and the listener interface for event handling. Now let's see what is event delegation model. The modern approach to handling the events, basically that we have just seen that the events that state of change any component. The next one is the event delegation model. So the approach to handling the event is based on the event delegation model. So delegation event model provides a standard mechanism for the source to generate an event and send it to set listeners. So what is event delegation model? Its concept is very simple. So source generates an event and send it to one or more listeners. In this scheme, the listener simply waits until it receives an event. Once received, the listener processes the event and then returns. So advantage of this design is that the application logic that processes event is cleanly separated from the user interface logic that generates those events. So user interface elements is able to delegate the processing of the event to separate the piece of the code. Now you can understand from this diagram. Event source, and once it will generate the event, once the event will be generated, we have to register the particular event. So basically you can see that multiple listeners may be there, right? So listener 1, listener 2, listener 3 and listener 4. And once you click on the button, for example, we are doing the addition of two numbers. So we'll take number 1, number 2. And once you click on the button, it will do the addition of both the numbers. So when you click on the button, that the particular action will be performed. So once when you click the button for the particular event, the event will be registered. So in this delegation model, listener must register with the source. For example, we have a button. Okay, so we have to register the particular listener with a particular button. So notifications are sent only to the listeners which receives them. There are three parts of delegation event model. One is event source, and another is a event listeners. So event source and event listeners. So components of event handling. First, we will see what is event. So event is a change of state of an object. It can be generated as a consequences of the person interacting with the elements in the graphical user interface. Some of the activities that cause events to be generated are pressing the button. For example, you do some graphical user interface programming, and when you want to perform something, right, and you have used the button, right, so when you press on the button, something will happen. When you enter something, some characters on the text box, then again something will happen. When you're selecting any particular list from the list box, right, something will happen. When you know drag the mouse, okay, so when you perform the drag and drop application from the mouse, then that particular activity will happen. So some of the event is happening through this particular components. So you can see that through through pressing the button, entering some characters through the keyboard, selecting any item from the list, and clicking the mouse. So in short, you can define the events that may occur also that are not directly caused by interaction with the user interface. So you can see that some other examples here. An event may be generated when a timer expires, right? So that there is one thing when you click on the button, and there may be another thing once you have set the timer, right? So for example, for 10 seconds, for 20 seconds, once the timer will be expired, then event may be generated. So there are two different different ways. One is directly and one is not directly. So here you can see that when timer expires or counter exceeds the value, or the hardware failures or software failures, then the operation may be completed. So we can define the events which are appropriate for a particular applications. Where you click the button, where you don't click the button, might be you are using some timers. Now when you talk about the events, at the same time you need that what is the event sources. So source is an object that generates an event which occurs when the internal state of an object changes in some way. Sources may generate more than one type of events. A source must register listeners in order for the listener to receive notifications about the specific type of events. And each type of event has its own registration methods. You can see one of the example here. So that when you talk about that registering the listeners, we will have a method public void add, then we'll have a type listeners. For example, you are using the button, right? So we'll have this component as button b dot add listener. So this is what this is add action listener if it is a type of button, right? So type means what? It depends on the type of event. So while we are registering the particular listener, it depends on a particular button or particular components. If you're using that button, you are using that action listener. If you're using that keyboard, then you have to use this key listener. If you're using the mouse, then we can use this mouse motion listeners. So it depends on the particular components. Now the next is the event listeners. What type of event listeners and how we are using it. So listener is an object that is notified when an event occurs. It has two major requirements. First, it must be registered with one or more sources. For example, we are having two different buttons, or we are having one button and one scroll bar, or one button and one list box. So one or more sources to receive the notification about the specific type of events. Second, it must implement methods to receive and process these notifications. So we need to register first, and then we have to implement the particular method for process the notifications. So the method that receives and process the events are defined where the interface is found in the package which is called as java.ewt.event. So if you talk about the example about this event listeners, when you talk about the mouse listener here, the mouse listener interface defines two methods to receive the notification when the mouse is dragged, or you can say them moved. So any object which may receive and process one or more, both these events will provide an implementation of the interface. So first the registration and second is the implementation. So basically, what are different types of sources? When you talk about the button, right? Because when you write the program, so first you can see there is a button, right? For button, what the button will do, that generates action event when the button is pressed. When you see that checkboxes, so what the checkboxes will do, that generates them event when the checkbox is selected or deselected. Next is the choice, that generates them events when the choice is changed. List, that generates action events when an item is double clicked. Generates item events when an item is selected or deselected. Menu item, that generates action events when a menu item is selected. Generates item events when the checkbox menu item is selected or deselected. And in the same way, you can see about this scroll bar, that also generates the adjustment event when the scroll bar is manipulated. Text component, that generates the text event when the user enters a character from the keyboard. Next one is the window. So that generates the window events when the window is activated, closed, deactivated, de-iconified, iconified, opened, or clicked. Different event classes as well as the interface while we talk about the different event classes. So the classes that represents events are the core in Java's event handling mechanism. It follows the hierarchy in event objects, which is generated through java.util. It is a superclass for all the events. So you can say about this event object contains two methods. One is getSource and one is toString. GetSource method returns the source of the event with general form is, you can say that object and then getSource. And second, a toString that will return the string equivalent to the particular event. Event classes, how the event classes are defined. So you can see the class AWT event that will define within the java.awt package, which is a subclass of the event objects. So that is a superclass directly or indirectly of AWT based events, which is used by the delegation event. So event object is a superclass of all the events. So while you're using the packages java.awt.event, and AWT event is the superclass of all AWT events that are handled by the delegation event model. Now the most important thing is, right, when we are talking about the different components. So for different components, what are different classes and what are different types of listeners are used. When you talk about the action event, so for action event you can see what type of listener is used. For action event, the listener which is used is action listener. For mouse event, you can see the listener which is used is mouse listener. For key event, the listener which is used is key listener. Item event, for item event, the listener is item listener. For text event, the listener is text listener. For mouse wheel event, you can see the listener is mouse wheel listener. Window event, you can see that Windows listener. For component event, the listener is component event listener. Container event, the listener is container listener. Adjustment event, the listener is adjustment listener. Focus event, the listener is focus listener. So you can see that different event classes and respective event listeners which are used. So at the same time, we can see that which event is used for what purpose. So sometimes the question will come like explain any 5 event classes. So you can see that out of all those event classes, you can select any 5 event classes and you can explain. So different types of events are different types of event classes. For particular event classes, what type of listeners are used? Or maybe there is a question, what are different events, and explain why these event classes are used. So these are the different events and how we are using it, how to handle these events. So we can implement the appropriate interface in the class, and then we can register the component with the listeners. And then when you're talking about the registration method, for registering the components with the listeners, different classes will be provided. When we are using this button, the method is called as button wide add Excel listener. When you talk about this menu item, again we can use this add action listener. When you talk about this text field, we can use this add action listener. Text area, add text listener. For checkbox, add item listener. For choice, add item listener. For list, add action listeners. So these are the different methods while you're talking about the registration methods. Okay, so this is all about the event listeners, event delegation model, different listeners, classes, and their uses. Thank you.